History laid the foundation
that informs our conversation. Welcome to the classroom.
From the church to the streets, and even in the suites, and all around the world. I'm gonna keep it real in the classroom.
Fannie Lou's classroom. Fannie Lou's classroom. Fannie Lou's classroom.
Welcome to another episode of Fannie Lou's Classroom. I say this every week, but I'm always super excited about the guests we have on today and the conversation we're going to have, which I think is an important conversation in light of where we find ourselves in this moment in time, not just in the United States, but in the world, globally. I think this is an important conversation to have. And so first, I got to always shout out the FLC team that makes this thing happen. Brooke, she always so quiet, but Brooke sits over there making sure our audio engineer makes sure everything is sounding good, looking good. So we thank Brooke for all of her hard work from week to week. Then, of course, Shirley's always holding it down. Again, Shanika has left us, and as we say, she moved on up to the east side. She got a piece of the pie. She moved on to something better than Friendship West. She's doing great where she is, so we thank her for her service here at the church. So Cheryl is having to hold it down. So she's doing the job of Shanika and herself for the moment. So we thank and praise God for their many gifts and talents that allows us to come here every week, and that we know to bring you the best, not only the best guests, but the best experience. So super excited. But I'm going to jump right in and introduce our guests on today because we have much to talk about. And they have so much to offer, so I don't want to waste a moment of not being able to hear the brilliance that you're going to hear today. So, of course, today's conversation is when Sankofa meets a Kairos moment. And so I think it's so important to talk about this in this moment as everybody is hopefully not being distracted by so much that's coming at us. We don't understand what's really going on. And I think Sankofa gives us that opportunity to kind of see, here's how we might move forward, knowing this is not new. Particularly the black folks, I'll say that. Now, other folks will kind of figure out what's going on because they haven't had to really respond to the level of fascism and racism that black folks have in this country. So let me introduce my guests before I get going down a rabbit hole, down the street, around the corner, and we haven't gotten started. So first we have the Reverend Dr. Gabby Cudjoe Wilkes with us. Dr. Wilkes is a pastor, leader, and author. She is the founding co-lead pastor of the Double Love Experience Church in Brooklyn, New York. Her work has been featured in Essence, Forbes, and the New York Times. Dr. Gabby is the co-author of Songs for Black Lives, Reflections for the Work of Liberation. She served as the co-young adult pastor at the Greater Allen Cathedral of New York under the leadership of the Reverends Doctors Floyd and Elaine Flake from 2013 to 2018. Dr. Gabby is the vice president of the Yale Divinity School, a member of the Morehouse College Board of Preachers, and a recurrent on-air contributor to the nationally syndicated morning show Get Up Mornings with Erica Campbell. Dr. Gabby holds a doctorate from Duke University, a Master of Divinity from Yale University, a Master of Arts from New York University, and a bachelor's from Hampton University. Dr. Gabby is a proud member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated and is committed to the work of love and justice. She resides in Brooklyn, New York with her husband, Reverend Andrew Wilkes. Let's welcome Dr. Gabby to Fannie Lou's Classroom.
Hey, y'all. Wonderful to be with you. Thank you so much, Reverend Ayers. I have to make one correction, though.
Okay.
President of the Yale Divinity School Board, not the whole school.
Right. They got to be changed in here. Something happened in
translation. That's a typo, I think, on my bio.
Hey,
I wanted to be clear.
You never know. You might be the president.
I mean, whatever the Lord is doing, but the Lord ain't done that yet. Good to see you, Sora.
Yes, and Dr. Gabby is not new to Friendship West or Dallas. You're a native, right?
Dallas, not Texas. Born, but certainly raised in Dallas. That's where my mama still is.
Yes.
So that's home.
Yes, for sure. Then we have the inimitable, the amazing Dr. Ed Gray with us. Dr. Gray began his career as a civic volunteer for the cities of Dallas, Arlington, and Grand Prairie, as well as Arlington School District and the Grand Prairie Independent School District. Dr. Gray researched environmental inequities in Dallas's communities of color. Dr. Gray is the leader of Dallas County Justice Initiative, serving as the president of the local affiliate of the Equal Justice Initiative. Dr. Gray has played a role in the removal of Dallas Confederate statues. Dr. Gray also played a leadership role in the placement of 4 historical commemorating markers commemorating the lynchings sites of 6 African American victims. Dr. Gray also is a board member of Remembering Black Dallas. Yes, we love Remembering Black Dallas here in Dallas, as they place historical markers commemorating African American sites throughout Dallas. Dr. Gray remains active in the community, successfully retired from AT&T after 41 years. Dr. Gray is a proud member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated and is active as a political consultant through Ed Gray and Associates. Dr. Gray is a past political commentator on WFAA, Inside Texas Politics, and radio host of KHVN, the Commish Community Champion Hour. Dr. Gray currently hosts his radio podcast show, The Commish Radio Show, and writes newspaper columns, which are published throughout the United States, and is a featured TEDx speaker. He holds a doctorate from SMU in liberal studies, research in environmental justice and civil rights, a master of liberal studies in American history from SMU, and an associate of arts applied sciences from El Centro Community College. And he is, come on now, a proud graduate of David W. Carter High School, located right across the street from Friendship West Baptist Church. So let's welcome Dr. Gray back to Fannie Lou's Classroom.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. Always good to be here. And the sister said she was from Dallas. So, I know she's from Dallas because she said it right, Dallas. Not Dallas, but Dallas. Townview Magnet. Got it.
Come on now.
Yeah, law magnet for me. Got it. And David W. Carter High School. All right.
I love you.
So I'm excited today. So I wanted to bring the two of you together. For one, I think this makes for a good transgenerational conversation. And so I think it's so important as we talk. So Dr. Gray, all that you bring, obviously, to community, but particularly your work around the historical markers and also being a historian, right? Understand the importance of remembering. I think that's important for us to have this conversation. And then, all that you bring to the current political, social context, not just Dallas, but, throughout the country. And then, of course, Dr. Gabby, just your fabulousness and your, just the ways in which you have a lot of wisdom, in my opinion. I'm going to say for your age, and you're much younger than me. Me and your sister are the same age. We're in the same age group. Yeah. I think you have a lot of wisdom. I think you're brilliant. And I think you have a really good grasp, right, on how we might use this time that we're in as a way forward, right? So I just wanted to bring the two of you together, and I'm going to let you all do most of the talking. But what I really want people to hear today is, one, the power of Sankofa as ritual, right? And understanding where we are and what we might think about considering doing by looking at past movements. Because I believe there's always something to go back and fetch. Right, and so it's real organic. We're just going to kind of get started and toss it out. But the first thing I think is always important to define terms for people, right? So let's just start with, we said this title of this show is Where Sankofa Meets a Kairos Moment. So either one of you want to just tell the people how you understand Sankofa?
Dr. Gabby, go ahead.
Okay, sure, happy to. So, Sankofa is one of those principles that I hold very dear. I think the most conversational way to talk about Sankofa is looking back so that we can go forward. It's often illustrated by the Sankofa bird, whose neck is visually looking backwards while the bird's body is looking forwards. And I think it's a wonderful opportunity for us to consider that there is a lot of knowing and a lot of power in where we've been, but that we also cannot remain where we've been to get through where we are right now. And so it's a beautiful way to honor what has been, to remind us that we're never starting from scratch. We're always starting from experience. It's one of the things I love to say to help people feel encouraged, but also that the things ahead of us are going to require some additional skill sets that we perhaps haven't needed yet. Mm-hmm. And that's why we cannot afford to only rest in what has been, nor can we afford to only create brand new experiences as though we don't have learnings that we can tap into from the past.
Thank you. Did you want to add
Thank you.
anything to that?
I will add on to that, and I wanted the sister, Dr. Gabby, to go first because I'm a gentleman, first of all. But most of all, I want to say we have to remember, as what I've often said, that I am a historical activist. Historical activist is sort of like what you just said, Dr. Gabby, about going back. So in order for us to move forward, we have to know where we came from. In Dallas, Texas, for example, most people think that civil rights bypassed us in Dallas. And I've proven, and people in Remembering Black Dallas and the Dallas County Justice Initiative have proven that we did indeed have a civil rights movement. But that is not exactly what we're at. We're not talking about what happened in the past, but we're also talking about how it affects us today and where we're going in the future. So in order for us to go forward in the future, we have to know what happened and relate it to how it is happening today. And there's a disconnect in the African American community in which we somehow think that the past is what happened on yesterday's timeline, as opposed to what is happening, what has happened before in the past, and how it's going to affect the future timeline.
Yeah. So, and I'm just also thinking about, and I think that it is what Dr. Greg Carr calls, right, the momentum of memory. And that for a lot of us, we have not learned the lessons. For some of us, haven't learned the lessons. And unfortunately, for some, don't want to know the lessons, right? So I'm wondering if we can start here, because you brought up, because it is most people have a commonly held belief that Dallas did not have a civil rights movement, that it was all rooted in accommodation, right? So can you tell us, what do people need to know as we want to do Sankofa? What do we need to fetch? What should we go back and grab from this? Well, you can give us examples of what happened in the Dallas Civil Rights Movement that you feel are useful now. And then, Gabby, I'm going to come to you. And in light of Dr. Gray's answer, what then would be some of the new tools or new ways that we might have to think about moving forward?
You have these good questions. You just really have to bury into it. So I wrote in my master's capstone thesis, Dallas Civil Rights, 1936 to 1963, with the 3 and 6 inverted for reasons. 36 because it was a centennial, and 63 because it was the assassination of President Kennedy. So I want to bring forward to how that relates to us and the historical activism that we just talked about, is that 63, it began with King coming to Dallas, and it ended with Kennedy leaving from Dallas. And see, the whole perspective in that is that we somehow seem to forget how both of those events transpired and transferred our community today. Example, in 1963, when the King arrived in Dallas in 63, he came to Dallas at the behest of Reverend Rhett James, who invited him to Dallas to talk about and to get us to be active in the community. The concept has been that nothing happened in Dallas. King actually arrived here in Dallas, actually was invited by black ministers. It was often said that black ministers met him at the airport, told him to turn around and go home. That never happened. If a guy can stare down bull connor and dogs, you know he's not going to be able to just be scared of people at Love Field Airport. So that didn't happen at all. But see, this whole concept in this has put us into a negative stance of us not wanting to do anything or feeling that we can't do anything because Dr. King couldn't do anything. But he stared down bomb threats at Fair Park. Fair Park. They had a bomb threat at Fair Park. He still gave a speech that night. So we go ahead and now we transfer that to how that affects us in Dallas today. How it affects us in Dallas today, that some people seem to think that there's no need for us to do anything. So there is a great need for us to do things, and those are the things we need to do. The things that we're fighting for now, that I hear every Sunday, and right here from the pews, that I hear is the same things that Dr. King fought for in '63 when he arrived.
Yeah, I I have to say, I'm new to this understanding that people felt like Dallas didn't do anything. Can y'all break that down for me for someone who has not heard that rumor? Is that what people think?
Let me, as Tupac Shakur would say, let me introduce the topic and drop it. So now, when I was a young man a long time ago, when I had a shag hairstyle, that's been a long time ago.
Long time ago.
Long time ago. It was told that Dr. King was met at the airport. This is something that people of my generation said, and it's been passed along, that he was met at the airport and people told him, "Don't come, Dr. King. We already got this taken care of." Dr. King arrived here upon 3 occasions. One time it was 1950s when he was at Good Street. When Good Street wasn't located in Oak Cliff, it was located downtown before they ran the freeway through it, and then they had to move. That's a different story. Then the second time is when he was at Fair Park, the music hall, when they had a bomb threat. And then the third time was at SMU, when he arrived at SMU. And we now have a historical marker at SMU now stating that. Now, that's one of the things I helped do in Clarence Glover, Reverend Clarence Glover, as well. So this whole concept then began as that nothing happened, and until John Wiley Price started marching and picketing. And then when John Wiley Price started marching and picketing, that's when black people all of a sudden had the nerve to do something. But that's not even the case. That's not even the case. If you name a person in Dallas that's older to remember, they can remember when Juanita Craft led the earliest boycott of Fair Park, the music, not the music hall, but Fair Park and the fair.
Right.
So that was the longest boycott that existed up until Dr. King's Montgomery boycott. So these are the things that happened before. It happened before. A. Maceo Smith, who we should have the name of a freeway named after him, instead of having the name of a freeway named after R.L. Thornton, who's a KKK member, but that's another story. But that being said, A. Maceo Smith, a proud member and general president of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated in the 1950s, who brought the NAACP conference here to Dallas. Nobody talks about that because they don't know.
Right, that's right.
So I want to, like I say, introduce a topic and drop it, And this is where we say that historical activism has to be there. We have to go back so we can go forward, so we can go ahead and say that we've been doing this for a long time. Yes. We ain't new to this. We true to this. So being true to this, that means we got to keep it going. And my concern is that some members of a newer generation, and they're trying to throw me out. And, a couple of years back, they said, well, who's going to be the next Ed Gray? I'm like, Jay-Z, who got next? I got now. I'm still here. So still being here, I'm still being active in the community and still doing. But we have to go ahead and do things now concretely. We're talking about boycotting now. We're talking about not going to places called, I can't name the name of a place, but it begins with an S, and there's another place that begins with a W. I don't even want to give them no name on that. But this is what we're talking about. We're talking about doing this, but we have to realize that when King was here, he talked about moving forward, and now we're forward, and now we must carry on the dream. And carrying on the dream is not necessarily marching in the streets, but making sure we have an impact on our financial sheets. That's it. No marching in the streets. The impact on the financial streets.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I mean, I wanted to give us a moment of modeling what we're talking about on the podcast, which is having this Sankofa meets Kairos moment, because before I even respond to the Kairos appointed time, kind of question, I wanted to make sure I was really understanding what you were referencing. So thank you for that, because I didn't know that was what was being shared down through the generations in Dallas. But what I will say is hearing that and knowing that is in the atmosphere, I think one of the things that we could do in this current moment is reclaim storytelling, digital storytelling, digital archiving, everything you just said, turning that into things that the right now generation can access with a click, right? I think we're in a moment right now where nothing needs to be taken for granted that we know. Right. Even if folks may know the big picture of an idea, we're in a moment where people do not know the nuances or the weeds. And so I think in this moment, in terms of what can we do right now, even going back into the weeds, teach-ins again, conversations, repetition, saying things many times to the point where folks are rolling their eyes, but they know what you're going to say.
Right.
And that means that the information has locked in a particular way, which does then allow for us to say, okay, now what do we want to go beyond this moment? But I would offer digital archiving, digital storytelling, through film, through conversation. How many folks know these stories of our history because they saw a biopic? And so forth and so on. So I would love to see folks connecting with Dr. Gray and bringing the stories that are inherent within him to an additional audience through different mediums.
And that's ironic you said that, Dr. Gabby, because I'm a part of a group of people, the Sagasi Media Group, and what we are doing now, we are putting together, just as you suggested, we're putting together on film. We just completed Martyrs Park.
Look at that.
Which is located 200 yards away from where President Kennedy was assassinated at. That's the site where 3 African-American men were hung in 1860. And in 1857, a sister, Jane Elkins, was hung there as well, dismembered, her body dug up. Just like right now, black women's bodies are not being respected in 2025. They were not respected in 1857. In 1857, her body, after she was hung, died. They dug it up, dismembered her, and used it as a study. And this is what we have. We have now a historical marker that's been placed there, not for that, but it was placed there to commemorate her life and the 3 lives of the gentlemen that were enslaved. I said they were enslaved. I didn't say they were slaves. It's a difference. We have more people now that are slaved now than there was then in 1860 when they were killed. So this is what we're talking about now. So Martyrs Park is going to be released probably in the summer of 2025. We've already had that completed. It's going to complete. You can go ahead and look that up. I will send that. Possibly we can put it in the chat so you can see the trailer for that. So that's already out. It also had to because I was the one who organized the commemoration of it. I had Reverend Dr. Sharon Patterson to be on it as well. So I wanted her to be there to represent black women. Black women. I needed a strong black women to go back in time so we could bring Jane Elkins to the present.
That's right.
And also make sure that we have a young sister, as we had in the trailer, you'll see in the trailer. She's looking wistfully at the memorial marker, and she's looking at it because she's wondering what, when, where, why, how, and I don't need to be here again. So that's what we have. And then Juanita Craft for Justice. That's another piece we have out as well. We're working on 2 of them. That one's we had to take a back seat on that one to move Martyrs Park because we just completed that one. So Craft for Justice, we have that one with Juanita Craft as well. Because when we talk about Juanita Craft, we talk about a pantheon of civil rights heroes that we need to think about now and how they affect now. That's the reason why we're here now. Strong black women, Juanita Craft, Fannie Lou Hamer. You know, this is why we're here. That's why you're here, Dr. Gabby, because you're there because each one, reach one, teach one. It is a continuum. Each one, reach one, teach one, continuum of moving forward.
Yeah, so I know Gabby were you going to say something, Dr. Gabby? Oh, okay. So I think that so much was just said in those moments, and I have so many follow-ups. So
my mama say I talk so slow, so I just try to remember, just talk real fast.
So I want to back into it, right? So, because I want to talk about, in this moment, just the lack of, it's like Malcolm X said, right? The most unprotected, disrespected, and neglected person in America is the black woman, right? So even when we look at the ways in which black women are viewed and treated in the political sphere, right? Even when it comes to black maternal care, like the way the gaze on black women's bodies has not changed since black women were enslaved. And whether they were property, brood souls, work ox, like the way in which we were, our bodies were treated, right, has not changed. It just manifests in different ways. And I think the point you were making about Jane Elkins, it's a book, I think it's by, what's her name? I think her name is, Berry is her last name. Maybe it's Diana Berry, but she, her book is called The Price for Their Pound of Flesh. So she talks about the value of enslaved bodies from birth beyond the grave, to your point. The way we have been used for medical experimentation, whether we are corpse or whether we were victims of Marion J. Sims performing horrendous surgeries on women, right, without anesthesia, though it was available. So I think some of what we do to look back and see how, because nothing has changed, and it's how do we then recover those stories, and how do we then, because for me, it's about how do we also honor Black women in the moment, because it's not just non-white folk who do that, but not just white folk who do that, but it's some of us also through patriarchy, through misogyny in churches, right? We still don't fully value Black women, right? So I think we have to learn how that's been very detrimental, and in the way in which we keep coming, right? What Black women do, we keep coming through, because we know if we don't, everybody gonna die. So sometimes we do it out of knowing if we do not do what has to be done, it's not going to get done. And you know what? We tired. Right? We should always have to be the ones to be looked to then come through. Because people do turn to Black women when stuff go kind of crazy. Because right now I can tell you how many people not just call me, but call my friends around the country. What we gonna do? What you gonna do? Right? So it's also valuing and honoring Black women. So that's just my little soapbox. So let me get back to what I wanted to say. Because,
Well, wait a minute.
Go ahead.
Let's talk about what you just said.
Okay.
That's the very reason why I wanted Dr. Gabby to speak first. I took a class at SMU called Global Feminism, which was taught by Dr. Candace Lucas Bledsoe. And one of the things Dr. Candace Lucas Bledsoe taught me, and it was about men and patriarchy. And we need men, Black men, let me just talk to you, there's no Black men.
Mm-hmm.
Black men need to come to grips with themselves and realize what we've done wrong to the sisters and what we continue to do wrong to the sisters. Reverend Dr. Iris Sessions was in class with us one day.
Oh.
Okay, that's the kind of class we had.
All right now.
So that's the kind of class we had.
Yes.
So she said to me, I want to give her a shout out too as well. She said, I think he gets it. Well, thank you, I appreciate it. But see, getting it also means that you have to repeat it, like Dr. Gabby said, repeat it. So I'm going to say this. We as Black men are guilty of that. How can we get our name from a woman, get a game from a woman, and then cuss her out and call her everything underneath the sun? We are the only ones who have a subculture where we make money and glorify bringing our women down. There's no other race of people that do that. They don't do that like that to the numbers that we do that. So that's what we need to fix. And then we had all these Black men who said, I can't vote for that Black woman. I can't vote for her. Then they start questioning what race she was. She's AKA. She claims she's Black. She is Black. She is Black. Her daddy's Black. Said that I can't vote for her. We're still doing wrong then. That's patriarchy. And that means that we have probably 30%, and they said 30% of the vote went to Trump, primarily through Black men, not Black women. That means we have a lot of Black men who are still worshiping white supremacy because it's a male that's leading it.
Yeah, so I think the reason why I want to bring that out is because part of Sankofa too is also not repeating. By fetching and going back and looking back, you say we don't want to take that into the future, right? It's that my thing of gathering and leaving behind, right? So looking back, we gather some things to take with us, but some stuff we need to leave behind. And I think that's one of them. Because patriarchy does not serve Black men, right? And I can go and list the reasons why I believe that. Gabby, like you ready to jump in? You want to jump in?
No, I mean, I really was just agreeing with you. I think part of what concerns me about Black culture when we do look back is that we have a tendency to believe that we did everything right back. And we do bring that misogynoir with us. We do bring that, even folks saying, who is the next Ed Gray? Like, you're saying I'm still here. And also, like, who is the next whoever the person is in their own skin? Like, we keep trying to replicate the matriarchs and patriarchs that we had on our walls in our history classes and our Sunday school classes. But they became who they were in their own skin, in their own time. And if we keep trying to become what we've seen and not who we are supposed to be in this Kairos moment in our own time, we're going to keep failing. And that's one of the biggest things. It's such a nuance because you don't want to say that there's not anything that we can learn from those figures. We can. My favorite form of literature is biographies and memoirs. I love biographies and I gained so much from that. But I do worry about our intention to always create the next this, the next that. Even dealing with Kamala, folks were trying to say, oh, well, she's the next Shirley Chisholm. Well, she's not.
Right.
They have very different commitments.
Right.
They just happen to both be running for the highest office in the land. They both have to be Black women. But again, back to the history that we need to teach. You know, we have to go beyond identity politics, but we just kind of get a visual in our head and say the next this, the next that, and that's hurting us too. So I just wanted to speak to that we have to get a little bit more precise about what we actually want to replicate from behind and what we want to leave behind and learn from and become better because we've learned those hard lessons.
100%. And I think that's the thing, right? Sankofa doesn't say go back and fetch the people. It says go back and fetch the lessons. Go back and fetch what that is useful. So it's not who's the next Fannie Lou Hamer. It is who, or for you, historical activist. Who's the next historical activist? However that person shows up in the world. It's the work.
Because I don't want anybody getting beat up to the point of barely living in a cell.
Come on.
The way Fannie Lou Hamer was beat up. For her voice to then matter at the DNC. You get what I'm saying? Like,
for sure.
We don't want to have to replicate everything. We want to go beyond that, but we want to have the spirit and the tenacity and the strategy of our ancestors and the resilience. But we also don't want to replicate the harm. And we're in a moment where we're replicating the harm because we're not looking in totality about what can come and what can stay.
For sure. And that's wisdom too, I think. That's wisdom. That's discernment of knowing what you need to gather and what you need to leave behind. I like, John Henry Clark says sometimes in a story there are no good guys. Right. And so we got to own that. And, and I think Dr. Claude Anderson, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't he have a whole book called Scoundrels and something else? Right. So he does a book on Black history, but he also does on those of us. He says, I'm going to look it up before we get off air, but look it up, Cheryl, and see which one it is. But that's to your point, Gabby, that's also, to me, that is also, I'm going to look back. We can't bring this forward because that doesn't give us a future. And so the last word you said, which I want to come around to, is strategy. Right? So, but I learned something new today. Every time you come on here, I learn something new. So I did not know that, and I call myself kind of know a little bit about Juanita Craft, right? But when you said the boycott she had was the longest until the 381 days Montgomery bus boycott, that is significant. And it also speaks to it's not just we're going to boycott. Like there was a real agenda. There were some demands. There was a strategy behind that. And I think about this. I was talking to someone who was saying they wanted to do the buy-in at Costco, like in a particular city. So they were like, yeah, I'm going to go up there and I'm going to do it. I said, well, have you asked yourself some questions first? Like, you just don't go, like, how is it going to be sustainable? What are your goals? The people you're working with, you're saying they're 75 years old. Okay, do they have a car to get to the local Costco? Can they afford the membership at the local Costco? If they're elderly, maybe widowed, do they need all this bulk stuff? What are they going to do with 55? What are they going to do with like these bulk items? You got to think through. And I'm just saying all that to say there has to be a strategy behind the boycott. And then how, in that way, we know what we're going after, how we're going to get there. Just like the boycott in Montgomery. Okay, Georgia Gilmore, the club from nowhere. That Black woman started selling plates, which paid for the gas and the insurance. Right? There's something, I'm just saying that I think sometimes we say we want to do X, Y, Z from the past, but do we want to pick up what they put down? in terms of how to think critically about how we move forward. What is this about? 1, 2, 3, the strategy behind that. And the boycott wasn't necessarily the first thing on the list. If you read a letter from the Birmingham jail, right, that wasn't the immediate thing, was calling for boycott, right? Even though that was Birmingham, but I'm just, the point being that that's not always the first thing that was always done. And I think the more I read, at least, and more books that I read about the modern day civil rights movement, I feel like they did a lot of time thinking about what they were going to do before it became public. And I think sometimes we react fast, and especially in this age where everything is social media driven and people are trying to get out front with ideas, et cetera, but no real strategy for a sustainable movement. We can't boycott something for 3 days, let alone 381 days, because sacrifice is attached to that too.
Right, and let me talk about the strategy.
Yes.
Strategies, and as a union leader, and I was a union leader for CWA Local 6215 in Dallas for 20 years. Mm-hmm. There is a strategy to a boycott, and most people don't know the history of a boycott. I'm not going to go into a history of what happened in Montgomery, but as you just said, Dr. Harris, is that there was a strategy and it was also flexible as well. So it changes. Things change as well, and you have to have a alternative. Just as you stated, if we're going to boycott Sam's and Walmart, you have to have a strategy for that. What's the alternative? If you're going to have a buy-in at Costco, what is the strategy for that? Are you going to supply the membership for the people to have the boycott or the buy-in? What are you going to do? And how long is it going to be for? And also, this is the deal, and I'll be quiet about it. You don't have a strategy and post it on Facebook and try to get some likes off of it. We're going to do this. Other people read Facebook too. Oh, guess what they're going to do? Friendship West is going to do this. You don't tell them that. You don't tell them that. I know. You just don't do that. So we have this immediacy of getting likes through social media to get our bona fides about how active we are, how much of an activist we are, and we don't get any results.
And I think, can I hop in here?
Oh, absolutely.
I think, Dr. Gray, your point is a valid one. I also want to name that another part of why I think so many folks give away strategy on social media is because we haven't thought through other facets of organization and communication. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it is a lack of, I don't have these folks' emails. I don't have these folks' phone numbers. I don't know where they live. I don't have their addresses. And so we're really in a moment where we really have to make sure that we can get to our people without relying on social media. And I think that has been something that has been really exposed in the past probably 2 years, but no more than 2025, as folks are really becoming more aware of how unsafe these social media platforms are. And so, yes, some folks do it for the likes. Some folks do it just to kind of, raise their hand and say, I'll lead. But a lot of folks do it because we haven't been building those off the grid databases. I pastor in New York, and we stream through Facebook and YouTube. I don't have data for the folks that watch our service on Facebook and YouTube. I know the numbers. I know how many folks stream. If they choose to comment, I know they were there, but I don't have data for who those folks are that are streaming, if that makes sense.
Right.
And so I think this is also really a moment in terms of the Kairos moment of what do we need to do now, where we need to realize that we've probably all detrimentally relied upon social media to spread our message beyond ourselves. And we do need to find new ways to go back to the basics of those underground meetings and talking to people directly and one-on-one and off the grid. And that's going to take some work. And it's going to harm some egos because your numbers are not going to be the same. It's not going to be as many people showing up, not as much chatter about what you're doing. And we have to even educate people into that, a lot of this real organizing work is not for the glitz and the glam. There's a whole lot of folks that made the civil rights movement work whose names we still don't know. And so I think that's some of the detoxing we have to do from the instant gratification of social media, mobilizing folks and amplifying messages, but also putting us at risk of exposure of what we're doing. And that's going to be a challenge. But I think that is one of the biggest needs of this current Kairos moment.
And I agree totally with you on that, because that's one of the reasons why I am exiting the business, if you will, from my podcast, because the numbers were driven down. I'm relying upon the numbers on Facebook and everything, but when they don't push it out, no one sees it. So if they don't push it out, no one sees it, then my ego's hurt. No one looked at it. So now what we have to do now is we have to go directly to the end user. And that's where we have to go ahead and say, hey, look, I want to talk to you about that. I'm pretty sure when people were trying to get that freedom, they didn't yell in the cotton fields and say, hey, we're going to leave at 2 o'clock. So no, they didn't do that. There's a way to go about doing it to make sure that we can. Now, that's the challenge. And I haven't came up with that, but that's something we have to work with in the moment that we have now.
Yeah, I think that just the way in which our ancestors used the Underground Railroad, whether it was quilts that had, messages mixed into the quilts, whether it's, the ways in which they that was their creative genius for their time. And I think that's both of your point, that's our challenge. How do we create the quote unquote Underground Railroad? And I think also, and I'm thinking about Dr. Fallon Wilson in this moment, because she does a lot of work, around technology and advancements in technology. And I know there are some ways that we can begin to build this digital Underground Railroad that I would more than happy talk to both of you about off camera. Because there is a strategy building around that and how we begin to connect one another, or we can communicate across the country to each other about what's happening, what we're doing, what we're building. If we're doing some type of collective, I'm just going to use an example, a boycott, how we're able to get to our people and get messages out to people on what we're doing, whether we're meeting up somewhere, whether we're going to engage in this type of action on this day collectively around the country, do that where people are not, where we're not under surveillance, right? And that's something we had a conversation about a couple of weeks ago, and I was exposed to some things. I was like, that's what we need, right? So I love to keep that conversation going off, again, off camera, but I think that is a way for us to begin to build then, Dr. Gabby, that database, that large database where we know, because a lot of us don't know where we are anyway doing the work. I'm sure some folks, grinding in some cities that we don't even know. They just doing what they know they need to do where they are. So very important. I think that is a strategy of how to deal with the moment we find ourselves in, which is going to require us to do something new and radically different if we're going to not just survive the moment, but thrive. It is not even about the next 4 years. It's beyond the next 4 years. And that's the other thing I want us to be, consider that. Let's not think, quote unquote, when Trump is gone, we'll do, or 26, people looking ahead, well, we got midterms coming up. That is important. But that's not the fix, right? So I just think how we begin to have more conversations like this, where we're thinking in a group, where there's a dynamic learning community, everybody's bringing their brick, and we're learning from each other, that we might come up with a comprehensive strategy that makes sense for our survival. And if it doesn't free us, we put it to the side, we leave it behind. And that which does free us, then we gather that information together and how we might collectively think about a way forward. And it's not about a person or one organization, one church. It has to be more of an institutional power coming together if we're going to beat this institution and this system that we're talking about. So you want to say something?
No, go ahead. I'm good. I'm just vibing off of what you're saying. It's great. Dr. Gabby?
Yeah, no, I'm here. I think, to the point about the work that you brought up with Fallon Wilson, I lead a digital technology and innovation fellowship here in New York at Union Seminary, and my fellows are faith leaders, mid to senior level faith leaders, and all of our work is about helping them find the tools that will help them do the work they need to do for this moment. And so I cannot underscore enough that we have to detox from the the feeling we get when we have instant connectivity on Facebook, because this off the grid work, it is not for the faint of heart. It does not give you the warm and fuzzies,
Right.
but in the moment that we are in, it's so critical, and you have to be prepared for folks to, metaphorically and literally slam the door in your face, to ghost you, to not respond. But let me tell you what I have found. I've been doing social justice work for a little while now. What I have found is this: when people need you enough, they will come and find you. They will say, where is that church? Where is that leader? Where are those people who, when I didn't care about this issue, were talking about it? Because now I care, I need some help. So we just have to stay on the wall. And I think that's another Sankofa learning, right?
Yeah.
Those that stayed on the wall when the cameras were there and when they were not. Ella Baker was doing civil rights work for 20 plus years before she
Right.
ever meets Martin King.
Right.
Right. And, she says to him, like, you just got here. We've been doing this. Right. And so I just think we're in a moment where we have to really gird our loins and recognize this is thankless but necessary work. And it's going to require us to be in the trenches in ways that many people will never see, but hopefully our communities
That's
will
right.
benefit.
And I think that's the thing, right? And Cheryl knows I say this all the time when I'm teaching a class or doing something. I always say, if you're in this work, if you're in it to see how your work makes a difference, then you might not want to do this kind of work. You may see it and you may not, right? And it's the fact that all of us enjoy some shade trees we didn't plant. And that's really how I look at that's what keeps me going most days, if I'm honest, right? When it seems like, oh my gosh, I don't feel like we're inching forward, but that's not my goal. My job is to do what I know to do. And then somebody else may come along and do that one thing. Again, they'll hit that's that Kairos moment, right? That's when, or as Martin King called it, the zeitgeist moment, right? Where you just happen to slide into that moment in time where it clicks and things change. But we keep building, on that. And I think if we have that understanding, then I don't think we'll be now don't get me wrong, everybody wants to be loved and affirmed. That's not what I'm saying, but I am saying you do it whether you're loved and affirmed from other people or not.
And those of us doing it have to affirm each other.
For sure.
So we know
Yes.
there's that right. I know Reverend Danielle, I could text her in the moment of any crisis and just be like, girl, soror. And that's all we got to say. She's like, girl, I know. She got it in Dallas. I got it in Brooklyn, right? And we just keep it pushing. So we have to also encourage each other. Also, shout out to Reverend Rochelle Andrews, one of our title fellows for the fellowship that I lead. I see her on YouTube.
Okay,
She's
all
doing
right.
amazing work. She's doing amazing work in Maryland and Nashville. Look her up, point blank period. But yeah, we got to encourage each other and remember that it's not competition, is collaboration.
That's
whatever
it.
piece of the puzzle we have our hands on, because we know the people are not going to necessarily encourage the leaders of this work, because the people are struggling. We all struggling.
Yeah, right.
We don't have time to go back and say thank you all the time.
Right.
But we can see each other and we can say, I see you. What are you working on? How can I support you? How can you support me? How can we get some respite? Can I give you some time off? Can I step in for you? That's also how we keep this work going. And I believe that's also a Sankofa principle.
Yes.
Because we saw how folks have come before us, found each other and worked together and encouraged and empowered one another, right? They the original entourages. Where you didn't see just one, you saw
Come
4 or
on,
5, walking into a room, not for the lights and the glamour, but for the support.
Right. And you're also speaking to even something even larger too, when you say that it's also about us understanding this principle of Ubuntu too, right? That and in that way, or Nutu, which precedes Ubuntu, right? It's this idea of that you have this divine spark in you. And I know that I have to honor that in ways that when I honor you, I honor myself. And I cannot be any more than what you can be in community. So you are, therefore I am. Like, how do we really see ourselves connected to that degree, to your point, where affirming you just comes as a natural thing, supporting you, it becomes like that's part of how we see each other. Because it's also a case of we don't see each other as we should, right? And sometimes we see each other through the lens of other people and stereotypes, tropes, because we hear them when they're thrown out when somebody's angry or when somebody doesn't agree with you. And we saw with Kamala hands down, right? I thought every trope that you could imagine was thrown on her. So to your point too, Gabby, right? You gotta leave that behind. We cannot take that into where we're going if we're gonna move through this. Because sometimes we're so colonialized in our own minds that we can be just as anti-Black as anybody else. And I think that's the work that's some work we have to do too. And I know I experienced it in many different ways. It manifests different ways, you know. Sometimes it's subversive, sometimes it's overtly. And Cheryl can speak to some of the ways that we encounter people in doing this work, and particularly in the justice movements, right? Because it's not, I think people sometimes jump in thinking, oh, we all about justice. But some people, right, they're justice oriented out there. But you have to live a just life. It's not about but it's do you live a just life?
Say that. That spoke to my soul.
So, and that, and that's my understanding of Micah 6:8, right? Do justice, love mercy, walk humbly. Like doing justice means, first of all, do I have a right relationship with myself? Do I love myself? Do I love who God made me and all my Blackness that I don't have to apologize for? Me being full of me has nothing to do with you. If you intimidated, that's on you, not on me, right? And then do I have a right relationship with you? Can I have with other people, right? And then I can move to, now I got to have a right relationship with these systems that are oppressive. And sometimes that right relationship means we got to tear this thing down. We got to deconstruct it and reconstruct it. We have to confront it, right? So for me, that's what that means. And as Dr. Alan Buzak says, to walk humbly with God means walk everywhere God is walking in the world. And for us, that's why we go into these places and do the work that we do, right? Because Spirit is there. Spirit is everywhere. We don't leave Spirit on the table ever. It is always with us. That empowers us. That's that divine power that we grab onto that links up with us when we're pursuing that justice work. So that's what I wanted to say. Gabby, you have something. I know you got to slide out of here in a moment. Okay. Dr. Gray, you're going to get the final word.
Well, final word.
Well, you got a few minutes. I know you need a little more time.
No. I just don't want to monopolize
leave us with some good wisdom.
You just heard me just go because I'm just taking it all in. I just like to say that the future that we have today has already been proclaimed by the things that we went through in the past. So we have to, as I stated before, historical activism is knowing the past so we can go forward in the future. We are now more concerned now with what someone else is going to do, but we're not as concerned about what we are going to do. We need to be concerned about what we are going to do. As a person who follows boxing and has boxed a little bit myself, you never concern yourself with your opponent is going to do. You always say what I'm going to do. They ask you, well, how are you going to get past his left hook? You say, how are you going to get past my right jab? I mean, this is what it is. We're concerning ourselves with what 47 is going to do, but we're not concerned what we're going to do. So this is what we have to do. We have to come up with a strategy, and we have to be flexible with our strategy. Again, in boxing terms, if that don't work out, I'm going to try this. We have to do that because they will come up with a new strategy. DEI is what they say now. They gave us. Now, see, that's the problem when people give you something. They can always take it back. They gave us Juneteenth as a holiday when they had no intention whatsoever to honor the holiday at all. They gave us Juneteenth because everyone was concerned when George Floyd was there. The whole country was in an uproar. It was not just black people marching. It was white people marching. It was people marching for justice. And in a way in which they decided to quiet this down, they had those nice commercials. All these corporations who have taken back DEI last week. Back then they said, oh, we have a reckoning now in America. We see what's happening in our heart, that you've been wrong so long that we are now going to come together. So they came together and they took away DEI, despite the fact that the most DEI hires are not for black men and black women. It's white women. I was here at this church a couple years back when we did a social justice action at AT&T Stadium against Jerry Jones. And I looked around the room and I saw everyone in the room, and we were about to do this action. But Jerry Jones' organization is considered a minority-owned operation when he dies because he's going to give it to his daughter. DEI. They give it and they take it away, but they're not the Lord.
Right.
That is the reason why we're here today. We're here today because they're not the Lord and we know the Lord. And that's why we're here today. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Gray.
And I just, if I can add, just the last thing I want to share before we end. One thing that I am really inspired by with the Sankofa principle and thinking about, in particular, the civil rights movement, is thinking about the ages of our activists. The fact that you have teenagers, folks like Diane Nash and Marion Wright Edelman, John Lewis, Stokely Carmichael, the fact that you have older adults, Ella Baker, Fannie Lou Hamer, the list goes on. And I just want to remind us that as we're setting strategy and as we're thinking, not to ignore the totality of the voices, because our teenagers right now, they have come up in a world where they were probably born when a Black man was president.
Yep.
They have been living through climate change. They have lived through a global pandemic. They have seen so much in a short amount of time. And so their strategies come from a completely different place. And we lose a lot if we don't hear from them. We also lose a lot if we silence our baby boomers and silent generation, because there's a gentleman by the name of Stephen Ray. He's a former president of a seminary, Chicago Theological Seminary. He made a post the other day and he said, elders, we are now in the position where we can say, what knowledge do you need to allow you to go forward? Not let me tell you what to do,
That's it.
but what knowledge don't you have? I thought that was so powerful. And so in this Sankofa Kairos moment, I just want to honor, I'm gonna be 40 this year, right? I need to know what the folks who are 20 years my junior, 25 years my junior are thinking about and thinking through, because they're gonna help me. And I'm in that bridge generation where I've got folks older than me, but I have so many younger than me. And I think that's another powerful thing that we miss if we forget those voices in this season.
Well, and I think to your point, this is Mama Dr. Itihari Torre, as we call Mama, Mama Itihari, right, always talks about the village as we understand it, not now this more co-opted understanding of village. But this idea that we all have a place in the village. And as we age, our roles shift and change, but nobody is ever put out, right? And so Mama Ava always taught me, too, that you always do this work in a transgenerational fashion. No one is left out the conversation. No one is left out of what we're doing. Like, we all have something to offer. And so depending on your role in the village, then you do that, and that helps us to be stronger. To your point, Dr. Gabby, if I'm an elder, then, she had to go. As an elder, then it would be, how do I pass that wisdom on? Or how do I ask questions about, what do you need this moment? What are you thinking? So it's conversation, right? It's also being in conversation and talking to each other and not at each other. And so it can't be, we don't have time to be in battle with generation. We don't have time for generational battles. And I think if we understand what it really means to know what our role is, then everybody still feels valued, they feel heard, and they know what I have to offer is being appreciated at this table that has to be expanded to include everyone. So, okay, Cheryl's giving me the 1 minute mark. So let me thank Dr. Gabby had to jump off. She had another meeting. So we want to thank Dr. Gabby for being with us on today. Definitely want to thank Dr. Ed Gray for coming back to the classroom. And as always, dropping that knowledge, because it is the classroom. That's why we're here. We don't have all the answers, but we at least want to give people something to think about. And hopefully you heard something that makes you want to do some more research, dig a little deeper, get more engaged in content. And also, if nothing else, to really think about what you are going to do in this moment and how you link up with others who share where you're trying to go, because that's how we're going to really be able to, I think, It's a lot being thrown at us, but again, we can't get caught up in distractions. I think a lot of this is what we're seeing are just distractions, and we have to be able to not get caught up in that, to be focused. But you got to know what you're going for to stay focused. So thank you, Dr. Gray. We appreciate it. And so I think I have two quick announcements. One, of course, you can always support Fannie Lou's Classroom by purchasing your own Fannie Lou Classroom t-shirt. If you're on your phone, you can go to friendshipwest.org/justice, and you'll see a link where you can purchase your t-shirt, or you can scan that QR code, order your t-shirt, and we'll make sure to get that out to you. And then lastly, want to remind you that March 16th, 17th, and 18th, we will have our Faith Days at the Capitol down in Austin. If you're in Texas, you already know it's already popping off down in Austin. But if nothing else, what we're going to do is show up and make sure our DNA is all over that place. So if we have to look back, if our future generations have to have that Sankofa moment, they can look back and say there was a people who did not take it lying down, that we're going to make our voice heard, and we're going to do what we can to disrupt as much as possible, while also knowing what are we for. So it's not just what we're against, but what are we for? What does it mean to flourish from our perspective and how we work toward that? So you can register today. You can scan that QR code. You can register today for the Faith Day at the Capitol. You should be able to go to friendshipwest.org and find the link and find more information on the full agenda for those 3 days. And when you register, you can see how you can decide what day you want to come and participate. But it's going to be an amazing time. It's going to be a packed time. But it's also going to be a time where we do a lot of training and organizing as well. So when you leave, you have some tools to take with you back to your respective cities here in the state of Texas. And it'd be beautiful if we had someone, I don't know, like Dr. Ed Gray, that could join us for the Faith Days at the Capitol. So we're super excited. Join us next week, 12 o'clock noon, where we'll really have more of a part 2 of this conversation with Deidre Reed, when we talk about real strategies that we can, some of what we can do when we talk about everything in detail on YouTube, but we'll talk in some generalities about what needs to happen and currently what's happening now and what some people are doing amazing work around the country. We want to highlight that so you can see it's possible. Sometimes you can only know what you can do, and you can see that it is possible. So super excited about that conversation on next week. Make sure you like us, subscribe, let other people know, hit your notification bell so you can know when we go live. Until then, we'll see you next week right here in the classroom.
From the church to the